um, so that you can have a better understanding of the kinds of issues in family law that are dealt with in our courts, as well as the ways that AC can help you if any of these issues arise, or if you have friends or relatives who are dealing with these issues or who may have to deal with these issues. Because we all have families, and the family law applies to all of us, even though most of us are lucky enough that we don't have to ever go to court. That said, we almost always know somebody who has had to get a divorce, or who has been asked to pay child support, or who is trying to make a decision about a child, and the other parent doesn't agree. These are just examples. So family law actually covers a lot of things, although there's echo. Let me try changing my microphone. Maybe that's a little better. Jenny, how does that sound?
You sound fine for me, so I don't hear the echo, so you can just keep going.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
But before Jenny and I start, just a note, and what I'll do tonight is talk a little bit about the family law system, but I can't give you advice on your specific situation. And if you have general questions, we can try to answer those. But family law is very specific to the facts of someone's case. Children are very different, relationships are very different, and people's lives are very different. So if what we discussed today brings up something that you are facing or that you will face in your own life, I would really recommend you get in touch with AC for help, or speak to a lawyer. So please don't take anything I say as legal advice. That's just something I have to say as a lawyer. I wish I could help everybody over Zoom, but I can't do it. And that's why AC and folks like Jenny are here to help. So what we're going to talk about first is, what is the family law? And I've said a little bit about that. Again, a lot of people think that family law is just getting a divorce, and that's part of it. But it also covers parenting and parenting responsibilities, which means decisions about who children will stay with, and who gets to make important decisions. So as a family lawyer, I often have people who come to me because there's a disagreement about the school a child will go to, or what language they'll learn in school, or their religious education. Those are disagreements that crop up. Also healthcare. Healthcare is something that comes up quite often in family law. So one parent would like a child to receive a certain kind of medical care, and another parent disagrees. And so they have to go to court, or they have to get the help of a lawyer, or they have to get some help resolving that disagreement. And that can happen even if the parties aren't married. Nowadays, fewer and fewer people are getting married, but they're having children and starting families, and the family law system covers them as well. There's also issues of support that can come up, and that's both support that parents have to pay to the parent of one child, and support that they pay to their spouse. The other issue that family lawyers help with a lot, that may be of importance to newcomers to Canada, are issues around relocation and travel. So as a family lawyer, I often have to deal with disagreements about travel outside of the country. So for example, one parent would like to take the child on, or their child on, a trip overseas, and the other parent disagrees, or is fearful that the parent will leave and not return. And that can be very, very stressful, and it can be a source of real conflict between the parents, especially if there are other things that they don't agree about. And so the family law has processes to help parents negotiate questions like that. There's also, of course, the issue of asset and debt division. So when people separate, if they own a house together, that has to be divided between them. And there are rules that govern the division of property, like homes, like bank accounts and savings, or even precious belongings that are really important to the parties. And lastly, family law covers emergency issues as well. So if someone is being abused by their partner or their husband or their wife, or they don't feel safe because of the behavior of their husband or wife, the family law is there to help protect them in a way that's different than the criminal law. It's specific to relationships that are romantic or familial. And so there's also a whole system in the family law to deal with that. So it covers a lot of issues, which is great because as a family lawyer, it's nice to be able to help people through a lot of different life situations. But it also means that it can be very confusing and overwhelming for someone trying to access the services of the courts. All right, go ahead, Jenny. Sorry. Let me know if you want me to say less before you translate. Please don't hesitate.
This is good. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's good. 今天晚上就是我做一个翻译。刚刚River 就是说什么是家庭法？家庭法包括很多东西，不只是离婚，它包括那个抚养孩子的时间与那个责任，因为有很多时候有小朋友的家庭，如果他们要分开的时候，他们都有很多不同，大家双方有不同的意见，譬如说是上学去哪里去，然后读什么学校啊，很多的问题，谁跟谁住，谁去带孩子，都是可以家庭法帮助你们处理的。还有那个赡养费跟那个抚养费，有时候有一方是没有去工作，有时候两个都有工作，所以是一个比较负责的calculation， 是对，所以家庭法是包括这些，然后对新移民或者是刚移民的人，那个家庭法也可以帮你们去，就是如果孩子要去其他地方，法院都可以帮助你解决这些问题。然后还有如果你有什么财产那个财产分割的都可以帮助。然后那个有什么，如果一方那个当事人是有危险的，那个家庭法是跟那个刑事法不同，家庭法有自己家庭法的那个保护令，在家庭法院可以帮助你处理。所以我们 AC 是可以帮助你们去怎么开始你的文件填写你的表格，去哪一个法院，非是高级法院或者是那个省级法院，我们都可以提供那个资料给你。Okay, River. I know it sounds shorter than what you provided, but yeah.
Probably you skipped over a lot of stuff I didn't even need to say. So
No,
that's
I covered everything. Everything.
okay. Thanks so much, Jenny. So, how is family law managed in British Columbia? So I want to start by making one really important point, and that's in BC, in British Columbia, family law can be resolved in Supreme Court and in provincial court. So if you want to, let's say, get child support from the other parent, you could go to Supreme Court or you could go to provincial court. Or if there was a disagreement about travel outside of the country, you could go to Supreme Court or provincial court. The only thing that you cannot do in provincial court is you cannot get a divorce in provincial court if you're married, and you cannot divide up property. Property has to be dealt with in Supreme Court, and you can only get a divorce in Supreme Court. But everything else can be done in provincial court. And that's important because provincial court, there are no fees. It is free to file a claim or an application in provincial court. The rules are much simpler in provincial court. There we go, there's the next point. The rules are much simpler in provincial court, although they are still difficult. It's better than Supreme Court. And there's lots of opportunities built into the provincial family court system to try and settle or resolve your disagreement without having to have a trial, which it can still be very, it can take a long time. It can be very stressful and can result in you being out of work for 3 or 4 or 5 or even more days because you have to be in court. And the other great thing is that provincial court, you can have an interpreter assigned to your case in court if you ask. And that means there will be somebody there who can translate what the judge is saying into Mandarin or Cantonese and can also speak to the court in English so that you can be sure that what you are communicating to the judge is exactly what you mean. Maybe you could translate that, Jenny.
Oh, you're muted, Jenny.
家庭法院跟省级法院有什么区别呢？很多问题都可以在省级法院处理的。除了是离婚跟那个财产分割，一定要在高等法院处理。其他的问题包括child support， 就是那个费用，那个赡养费。抚养费都是在省级法院。旅行小孩子去旅行如果有一方不同意，他可以在省级法院处理。省级法院有什么好处呢？它比较是那个程序是比较简单的。还有它没有什么法庭的费用，还有免费的翻译，还有它会提供很多那个和解的机会，等你不用去上庭，因为很多人如果要上庭，可能不可以就是上班。对，就是这样子。应该我已经说完。对 ，OK， River 。
Unmuted. There we go. So for that reason, were there any more? Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. I see that slide now. Wonderful. Oh, did we miss a slide there? There we go. Perfect. So again, and I just want to make this really clear because it's really helpful, I think. You should go to Supreme Court if there are property issues and if you need to have a divorce. But one thing to consider is that if you don't need to divide property right away, if it's not urgent, and you don't need a divorce right away, and often people don't need a divorce right away if they're just separating, you can go to provincial court and deal with parenting issues, deal with support issues, and then after that, you can go to Supreme Court. And the benefit there is that instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars filing in Supreme Court and dealing with all of these different issues, you can get things done more cheaply and I think more quickly in provincial court. And then later on, you can go to Supreme Court to get your divorce or divide up property. So that's something to consider. It is much easier if you do not have a lawyer or if you can't afford a lawyer to resolve your issues in provincial court. I always recommend people hire lawyers when they go to Supreme Court because it is very complicated. But if you have a lot of property, like a family home or bank accounts with a lot of savings, it may be a good idea to spend that money and go to Supreme Court right away. Maybe you could translate that, Jenny, just because it's a lot, I know.
So 刚才River 就是说到，什么时候你会去 Supreme Court？ 然后他说就是，其实你可以先去省级法院，处理那个小朋友的，抚养费跟那个就是旅行的一些问题，然后之后你才去那个高等法院，因为省级法院是很多东西是比较简单，比较快，拿到那个 order 是比较快一点的，时间是短一点。他还建议你们要找律师，因为很多家庭的问题分开的问题是非常非常的复杂的，还有每个家庭每个人的情况都不同，所以如果你是你觉得我真的负担不起去请律师，你可以去很多其他的机构去问一下有没有免费的法律帮助你。然后就是他还要说，如果你有很多银行的户口，然后很多财产去分割的，你可以考虑就是先去高等法院，就是都是说每个人的问题是不同，所以他是真的建议先去找律师。
Thanks, Jenny. And so next I want to talk about alternative dispute resolution and mediation. So when people think about our court system, they often think about a judge in a black gown in a courtroom, and each side gets to say what they think should happen, and the judge makes a decision for them. And that system is a big part of the Canadian family court system. But more and more, the courts are encouraging people to try and settle their disagreements without having to go to court and without having to fight. And there are some benefits to doing this that are important to consider. one is that in my experience, the kind of family order that you can get when you settle with your partner or with your wife or your husband, especially when it involves children, is almost always better than something a judge is going to do, because only you really know your children. And I think that's even more true for families of immigrants who have unique experiences and cultural practices and beliefs that may not be shared by a judge who doesn't have that same background. So you may have values, you may have concerns about your child's well-being and care that a judge is just not going to understand in the same way that you would as someone who loves your child and has grown up, or your child has grown up with you. And the same is true of your spouse, even if you're very upset at them or you're not getting along with them. And so when possible, it's always a good idea to try settling. And there are a lot of great opportunities in our family court system to try and settle. The first and easiest is when you file something in provincial court now, you'll have an opportunity to meet with a family justice counselor. And that's somebody that can make you aware of all the options available to you in resolving your family law problem, which includes maybe sending you to mediation. And mediation is an alternative to court where you sit down with the other person, with your wife, your husband, and you explain what you think should happen, and your wife or your husband explains, or your spouse explains what you think should what they think should happen. And the mediator tries to find the points you have in common and tries to find a middle ground that you can both agree to. So the joke is that you know you've got a good solution to your family dispute when both people are upset. Both people are unhappy. That means that you've succeeded. And so that can cost some money, but it often costs a lot less than hiring lawyers. And it often costs a lot less than going to court. So that's something to consider. And there are a lot of resources available through the family court system if that's something that you think might be worthwhile for you and your family. The other, oh, maybe I'll let you translate that, Jenny, and then I'll move on to the second kind of mediation.
在省级法院有其实我们那个加拿大的家庭法都是有很多人都以为只是有一个法官，然后法官就是判谁那个小朋友跟谁啊，然后那个费用是谁付但是现在很多都我们觉得希望大家用多一点那个和解啊，跟不用想庭的方法去解决那个婚姻上要分开的问题。第一件，如果你去省级法院，第一件事你会有一个叫Family Justice Counselor，他是会跟你们就是跟你们说你有什么你的情况有什么你可以做的有一样就是 mediation， 就是用和解的方法去解决你的问题和解是什么呢？ mediation 是什么呢？就是双方跟那个 mediator就是一起，然后你就是跟对方大家说你自己想要什么不好意思，我的小朋友在外面 就是你跟 mediator 说你想要什么，你那个结果你要想什么，双方都跟 mediator 说，然后 mediator 就会帮你们去了解对方，然后大家去找一个中间刚刚 River 就是说中间的 middle ground，但是呢，他刚刚还做了一个玩笑，就是说如果大家都不开心，一个解决方法是大家都不是最满意的，因为可能一方是要想在这里，然后另一方想在这里，然后他们其实最后同意的方法是在这里，对。I tried my best to translate your joke.
Did it not work? Oh no. Jokes never translate. That's really hard. So there are also simpler ways to mediate. And I want to mention these as well, though I think it can be really beneficial to explore an actual mediation process with a private mediator. And there are inexpensive mediators through Mediate BC. But let's say that you don't want to go through a separate mediation process. The first thing is that in our court system, especially in provincial court, there are a lot of opportunities to use a judge as a kind of dispute resolution professional or mediator. So when you first appear in court at something called a family management conference, that's when you first go to court after you've filed your application or you've responded to an application about something. The judge is going to try to see if you can agree to some or all of the issues. And so I always advise people going to court to really think about what they might be able to agree to and even communicate with the other side to see, can we agree about who the children are going to live with or when they're going to spend time at my house or your house? Can we agree about child support? Because we can agree that my income is this amount, and so I should pay this amount in child support. Can we agree about school? And that way, if you do have to go to court about something you really don't agree on, it's one thing instead of 10 things. And that will save you time and money and stress. And the things that you are on the same page about, that you do agree about, those are out of the way, and you can sort of start to live your life again, rather than have your life on hold while you wait to resolve these issues. The other thing is called a settlement conference, a family settlement conference. And this is, again, free in provincial court. You get an hour to sit down with the other person, your husband, your wife, your spouse, and a judge. But the judge they're not acting like a judge. So they are a judge, but they're just there to listen to each side and see, like a mediator, if they can get you to agree to something. And the benefit, I think, to this process is that because they're a judge, they will also sometimes tell you what they might decide if they were judging your case. And that can be really helpful if the other side doesn't want to budge, they're being stubborn. Sometimes it can help to hear that if they were judging your case, they might say, look, you do have to pay child support, or what you're asking for isn't reasonable based on what you're telling me. That can sometimes encourage people to agree to something they wouldn't otherwise agree to if they were just talking back and forth. In all of these processes, you can get something called a consent order. And that means that when you agree about something with the other side, you can put it into an order, and the judge can grant that order that you've consented to. And then it records your agreement, and you can enforce it in court if the other side decides to disagree. So let's say you agree with the other party that you're going to have parenting time 50-50. So 1 week at your house, 1 week at mom's house, for example. And then mom says, no, I don't agree anymore. You could go to court and say, well, look, we have this order, and we decided that we were going to share parenting time 50-50. And the judge will ask the other person to follow that order. So it isn't just an agreement that you're making on paper. it's enforceable as if a judge did order it. But because it's something you've agreed to, hopefully it can reflect exactly what you think is best for your children. And it can be more specific than something a judge might grant if they had to hear you at trial. And that is also available, lastly, from a lawyer. So you can sometimes hire a lawyer, and the lawyer will speak to the other side, or they'll speak to another lawyer. You each hire a lawyer with the intention of trying to come to an agreement. And lawyers can draft an order and send that order to court, and that order can be granted without you ever having to even go to court in person or even over the phone. And so that can be another way to avoid expense. That's a good idea, especially if you are trying to come to an agreement about property. I often suggest that unless you really know what you're doing, if you have significant property, like investments or a home, that you get some legal advice about that, because those issues can be really important. A home is a lot of money. Investments are really important. And that also goes for debts as well. There are special rules in the family law that deal with how debts should be divided when parties split up. And those rules are very important, and debts can be a lot of money and they can really affect your life. So if you have significant debts or significant assets, it is always worth it to make an appointment to speak to a lawyer, even for an hour or two, just to get an idea of what your rights are and what your obligations might be. And if you find that what you're hearing from the lawyer means that you might be able to agree to something with the other party, lawyers can help do that too. They're not just there to go to court. They can also help you record an agreement. Go ahead, Jenny.
当你去省级法院填写你的表格的之后，你也会有那个叫Family Management Conference， 是有一个法官帮助你们，好像一个和解师一样 ，mediator 一样，帮助你们处理你们可以有什么可以大家同意的东西，然后先解决，有什么不同意的，就是他会建议你们就是不用详听去解决你们的问题，然后之后你会有机会做一个 settlement conference， 是一个一小时的也是一个法官帮你去，如果有同意的东西，他会出一个文件叫一个 order，然后那个 order 如果之后另一方不同没有跟那个 order 那个 agreement 去做的话，你可以就是去那个法院跟法官说，这个是我们之前法官已经我们之前同意的，然后在法院已经file 那个 order， 所以如果有一方没有做到那个 agree 的那个同意的的东西，还有是那个 order 的东西，你可以去法院去跟那个法官说的。然后他River 说另一个方法是怎么去不用详听，不用去法院呢？就是你可以找一个律师，他也是一个和解式的身份和就是他可以帮你做一个那个 order， 也是一个文件可以去法院 file 的。然后还有私人的和解师，你可以去那个之前他说到是Media BC 是有很多不是很贵的，你有很多不同的 对mediator 和解是可以帮你做那个同意书，就是然后就可以在法院跟那个法官说，如果之后他们没有做到那个同意书的东西，你就可以再去法院。River 还要说，就是如果你有很多财产房屋投资的那个投资的项目，他真的觉得建议你要去找一个律师，因为是很复杂的，还有很多规矩的，所以如果你可以负担的话，你应该就是去找一个律师去帮你处理这些问题。然后如果你真的有东西是你不同意，真的找不到一个大家同意的东西，那些问题你才去法院去处理。那个时候你会已经有很多东西你是已经同意，你就是去法院去解决那个你们双方不同意的东西，然后应该可以省了很多金钱和时间。
Thanks, Jenny. We can move on to the next slide, I think. So how do you start a family matter? We've discussed this a little bit already. Oh, wait, you missed it. It sneaks up on you, the slides. So in provincial court, you would start by filing an application about a family matter, and different registries have different rules about how you should do that. So if you're in Surrey, first you have to file something called a notice to resolve, and that puts you through a process again where the court is trying to find ways to get people to agree without having to go to trial. If you're in Vancouver, if you're in Vancouver, you'll start with what's called an application to obtain an order. These forms can be challenging to complete. They're very long, but that is one of the things that AC can help with. These are forms that we help people complete every week. In Supreme Court, you would start with a family claim, which again, I would recommend that you get the help of either a lawyer or AC in completing a notice of family claim, unless all you're doing is getting a divorce. Because again, Supreme Court is a lot more complicated and the forms are not designed for people without legal help. Whereas in provincial court, the forms I still think are quite challenging to complete. They're very long, but they are trying to make them easier to read and easier to fill out for people who may not have a lawyer. Still, AC is a great place to go to get these forms filled out, especially because these forms are your first you're opening the door to the family law system. And so I always encourage people to start with their best foot forward, which means making sure that everything you need is in the form and that that you're communicating to the court as much as possible about what you would like to see happen for your family. Lastly, you can, again, record settlements without having to file an application. So you can do that by filing what's called the minutes of settlement. And you can do that in Supreme Court. I just helped somebody where their only issue was a car, splitting a car 50-50. One person wanted to pay their spouse, their ex-spouse, for the car, wanted to keep the car. And so we drafted a minutes of settlement. So we drafted an agreement and we were able to file that with the Supreme Court and because we did that, it's enforceable as if it was an order. So there are, again, with the help of AC or with a lawyer, ways to record your agreement, and those are often much less expensive than going through the full court process. So, and at the same time, if you can't agree with the other person, then you can also get help filing your application and going to court. And if you don't agree with the other person, there is always in our court system an opportunity to sit in front of a judge and to explain how you think things should be, and to have a judge make a decision. That is a right that everybody has, and you should never feel like you have to agree to something that doesn't feel okay for you or for your children or for your family.
如何开始家庭法律的程序呢？两个在省级法院、高等法院都是非常的复杂。省级法院是比较简单，但是也是非常的复杂。省级法院你第一份递交的表格是叫 application for family matter， 这是因为刚才说到，就是你在不同的地方的法院去递交第一份文件，那个文件都是不同的。比如说是在Surrey 的话，就是一个 application for family matter， 然后如果你是在 Vancouver 的话，那个就是另一份的表格叫 application for an order family order， 所以我们 AC 都可以帮助你，就是帮你填写表格。我们每个星期都帮很多没有律师或者已经见到律师的人去填写他们的表格。如果你去高等法院填写的那个第一份文件，就是叫那个 Notice of Family Claim， 它是在 River 眼中它是比较复杂，比那个省级法院的那个表格是比较复杂的，但是其实全部的文件表格都是其实需要如果没有那个法律经验是很难去填写一份很好很完整的一份表格上去法院，所以我们建议你们可以去找律师，或者是你可以找我们 AC 帮助你。还有如果你有很多东西是已经同意的话，或者是你只有一样东西需要分隔，就是 River 刚刚说他刚刚帮那个有一个客人，就是有一份叫 Minutes of Settlement， 就是他们已经就是同意分他们一台车一人一半，然后他就帮那个客人去做一个 Minutes of Settlement， 然后就是去法院递交，然后就可以他们一人分一半那个财产。最后呢，如果你真的找不到那个和解跟同意的方向，你最后都有那个权利去在一个法官的跟法官说你自己觉得怎样处理，然后有一个法官帮你做一个决定。
Thanks, Jenny. Let's maybe move on to the next slide, although I could talk about these all night, so it's very difficult to get through all of this. But I do want to talk about court interpreting services because I think this is a really essential tool, especially for newcomers or folks who speak English as a second language. And I want to emphasize that even if you speak English, and I have had many clients that speak English fairly well, but maybe they didn't feel entirely comfortable being able to understand court language. So the specific language that might be used by a judge or by a court, even though they felt okay with conversational English. And I also have had clients who speak English okay, but they find court so stressful that they felt like they were not be entirely comfortable being able to express themselves. Because if you think about it, depending on how stressful your family matter is, and some family matters can be very frightening, where there's family violence, or whether you're the person who has experienced family violence or you're someone against whom allegations of family violence are being made, that can be very frightening. If your disagreement is about getting to see your children, or really important financial issues that are worth a lot of money, that's really that can make it very difficult for people who speak English as their first language to say what they feel they need to say to a court or to a lawyer or to the other side. And if you add to that English as a second language, that can be an additional barrier that can make it difficult to feel comfortable and at ease. And so that's one reason why I encourage folks who speak English as a second language to consider a court interpreter, especially in provincial court where it is free of charge. If you do need to notify the court registry, so you would call the registry or visit a registry and explain that you'd like an interpreter present and what language you'd like them to speak well in advance. So maybe as soon as you file your application or your response to an application. But because it's free, it is something worth considering. And the other thing that's helpful is that you can tell a court interpreter that you are okay in English, but you'd like them to just be there. If there's something that you don't understand that the judge has said, then you can stop the judge and ask the interpreter to translate for you. Or if there's something that you're trying to say, but you feel like you're not getting your point across, you could also then ask the interpreter to translate something for you. So it doesn't have to be a situation where the translator or the interpreter is doing what Jenny's doing for me. Which is very wonderful, but some people feel like that might slow them down too much, and so they don't want to do it. But it could be as simple as just having them there so that you feel secure in the knowledge that you are going to be able to explain to the court your side, because that's very important, I think, to feeling safe in what is a very stressful situation. So maybe translate that, Jenny, and then I'll just talk about Supreme Court because it is a little different there.
在省级法院、省法院，很多费用都是是免费的。我们想跟你说，就是一个翻译的服务，它是免费的。有很多人就是他是懂英文的，但是想听。尤其是家庭法、家庭的问题，他们都非常紧张，还有可能有一些人是有家庭暴力的经验啊，还有家庭的问题，有小孩子的，都有可能比较有一个带动的一个情绪吧，所以再去想听的话。应该觉得 会很紧张，可能好像我现在一样。那个他们如果要用那个法律专用的语言，他们可能不懂是什么的意思，或者是他觉得也会觉得啊，我怎么说那个法官才明白呢？所以如果你是不懂英文，或者是你的母语不是英文，这个翻译服务是免费的，所以你可以就是跟法院说你需要这个服务，但是如果你说我懂英文的，我可以我自己说大部分的东西，但是如果我有需要的话，那个翻译员会在法庭你想听的时候，或者是那个 settlement conference 你们一些如果你有需要才帮你做那个翻译，对 ，OK。
Thanks, Jenny. And so just to say that it does cost money in Supreme Court, you'll have to get your own court interpreter. And you can find that by contacting the Society of Translators and Interpreters of British Columbia, for example. So I'll put that in chat, the link. That's an example. And they'll cost money, whatever their rates are, depending on the interpreter. And so that can make it more challenging or less appealing to use an interpreter in Supreme Court. And again, the way I think of it is that is another reason why provincial court is a great place to resolve issues like parenting, like child support and spousal support. If property issues are not a big deal for your family case, or they're not urgent, or the family issues or the property issues are simple or straightforward, which they sometimes can be. If you bought a house with your wife and it's a matter of splitting the house 50-50, you can do that on its own. You don't have to also do, child support and spousal support and parenting in Supreme Court and have to pay for an interpreter, pay for court, pay court fees, which are significant, and pay a lawyer, which is a lot, a lot. So I really hope someday soon court interpreting services are free in Supreme Court for families as well. I think they ought to be, but they are not right now. So it's just another way that provincial court is friendlier to people that don't have legal help.
在高等法院那个翻译服务是要费用的，还有你要去那个你可以去那个 STIBC 那边找你自己付费的翻译员服务。如果你的River 说到，如果你的问题不是是很简单的，如果你的问题是很简单，或者是只有很小的财产，或者是你没有小朋友，你可以去高等法院做你的离婚跟你的财产分割一起去做。因为如果你要去高等法院的话，那个费用是一定是比在省级法院是多超多很多。所以如果你可以的话有什么问题先去那个省级法院去处理，然后真的不可以处理的东西才去那个省级或者是高等法院处理。
Great, and I think we can move to the next slide. How AC can help. Jenny's going, I think, to talk a little bit more about this. But I want to say completing forms properly is one of the best things you can do for family law case, because judges will rely on it, on your legal forms, whether that's your application or your sworn statement, setting out the facts that support your case. Those can really help a judge, especially if they're lost or confused and not sure what it is you or the other parent is looking for in your family case. So AC is really a helpful resource. I also want to mention, as you think about how to navigate or help the people in your life navigate the family system, how to make good use of services like AC and lawyers. So a lot of people think that the only way to hire a lawyer is you go in and you pay the lawyer a big, you give them a big check and they put it in trust and they bill you and they do all kinds of work for you. And then when they use up all your money, they send you another bill. And it can be very expensive. And it is also, I think, very confusing because before you know it, and all of that money, that big check can be gone. And maybe you're not even at a trial yet. And so one thing that is helpful to think about is that you can use lawyers to deal with specific issues. So you can, for example, get help from a lawyer in getting legal advice about your property. And then you can go to AC and complete your forms with AC and file your forms, maybe go to mediation and try to settle your dispute now that you know from a lawyer what might be a good idea for you to agree to. And then maybe before you finalize that agreement, you go back to a lawyer for a couple hours and you have them look over your agreement. So instead of hiring a lawyer for 6 months to answer emails back and forth, between you and your ex, you can have a lawyer look over your agreement and help you finalize that agreement. So instead of it costing $20,000, maybe it only costs $2,000 or $1,000 if you're really, really good about it. Or if you think you've got to go to trial, you can hire a lawyer to represent you at trial and not have to pay the lawyer for the 1 year leading up to that trial, where again, you're trading emails back and forth. So I like to make people aware that you can find lawyers and you can ask lawyers to do specific work for your file or for your family matter, and maximize the benefit of legal help without having to spend oodles and oodles of money that maybe should be spent on your kids. And one way that you can do that also is by getting help from organizations like AC that can help you fill out your forms and complete financial documents or financial statements, and rather than paying the lawyer to do that work. And so I think Jenny will talk a bit more about how AC can help you complete your forms. But I just would like to encourage people to advocate for yourself when dealing with lawyers and understand that lawyers can be really helpful. And I really encourage people to get advice about their specific situation from lawyers. But you can use them as a tool. They don't have to be there for every single step of your family law matter. And I'd rather people do that than avoid lawyers and not have the benefit of their help, or use a lawyer for the first 2 months and then you run out of money and you have to do the rest all by yourself, which I think is it's sad. It makes me sad because I want lawyers to be able to help people, and that can't happen if we're only there for the first part, especially because if you have to go to trial, it can be a wait. It can be a long wait. Go ahead, Jen.
我们的 AC 法庭之友如何可以帮助你呢？我们除了家庭法之外，其他的民事法律问题，我们也会帮助你。我们最重要是帮助你去怎么填写你的表格，然后就是等你帮你了解你想停的时候需要什么，准备什么，在哪一个地方去递交你的文件，很多东西我们都会提供你所需要的资料。还有我们其他的服务是我们没有翻译服务，但是我们有很多义工都会说不同的语言。其实今天晚上我自己是说广东话的，我的国语不是太好，但是我们有很多其他的义工是都是说国语的普通话的，所以如果你们有需要的话，你们可以联系我们。或者是等一下你可以我们有义工可以帮你预约，我们每个星期四都会可以帮助你们去填写你的表格。然后我想说就是River 刚刚说到的是如何获得更有价值的法律服务。那个律师是你要请律师，大家都知道是蛮贵的，一小时可能你要很贵的费用，每个律师不同，但是如果你要律师帮助你的，你可以就是选择什么东西什么时候要律师的真正要律师帮忙。如果你还没有就是填写你第一份表格，你可以先去一个律师先问一下我怎么处理，我在哪一个法院去递交我的表格，然后你就可能就是付的费用就是你1个小时2个小时，然后你就可以去我们 AC 这是机构帮你你跟我们说那个律师跟你说的法律意见是什么，然后我们可以帮你处理填写一个文件。我们每一个星期四，我之前说到，就是有我们那个 paralegal 跟有当值的律师跟你们一起做那个文件表格。paralegal 就会帮你就是填写表格，然后我们有一个律师看一下，然后跟你了解你的情况，看看是否就是正确，然后就会给你一份文件，你可以去递交。我们会在每个星期就是填写表格完成之后，我们会跟你说你要准备什么去递交怎么去如果是你已经递交的文件，你可能要给你的另一半发这个文件，怎么发我们都会跟你说的。然后我就是想说其他的服务我们 AC 我可能我不知道这里有没有人需要，但是我们有那个特别的服务，就是如果有一些人是有性别暴力的受害者，我们都会提供服务，就是我们都会比较有一个不同的处理方法。 还有如果你不是卑诗省民的话，我们也可以帮助你。如果那个问题是可以在省级或者是高级法院去处理的，我们都可以帮助你。对 ，OK。
Thanks, Jenny. So I think that's it for my comments. I don't know if we now want to open it up to questions if there's time, Jenny.
Yeah. 现在我们可以就是我知道有很多问题，我看到好像蔡小姐，你有没有看到很多问题？我们现在可以叫 River 答一下。
好，那我就把这些问题一个一个，就是先问你们，然后你们再回复，然后我再问下一个。然后这边有个问题是想要我先用中文，然后再说英文。So River, I'll be like relaying the questions and saying it both in Chinese and in English, so both you and Jenny can talk about it. So this question actually was directed to River, but I guess both of you can talk about it. So what is the sort of fee payment structure in the Supreme Court? I think they're just concerned about the cost of going there. 然后用中文说一下，就是问题是有关高等法院的收费标准是多少？谢谢。
Okay, so the short answer is right now it costs $200 to file a claim or to file a counterclaim in Supreme Court. And then there are filing fees for most of the steps, I should say, after that. So for example, it is $200 to file a notice of trial to set a date for a trial in family court. It's $80 to file a notice of judicial case conference. That's like a settlement conference in provincial court, $80 for that. It's, I think, trying to think about how much it is for an application.
I think it's also 80.
I think it's also $80. Yeah. It's only $30 to file a written agreement. So there you go. That's a lot cheaper already. And again, you can file a written agreement in Supreme Court without a family claim if you're able to agree outside of court. Great way to save money. If you're on income assistance or disability, you can go to court and ask for a waiver of fees so that it doesn't cost anything to file. But it is still very complicated. I do not advise going to Supreme Court without at least getting some help from a lawyer, because there are a lot of rules and not all of the rules are written down. Some of them are just unwritten rules of the game. And that's very frustrating. Even for lawyers, it's frustrating. And lastly, there's something called costs in Supreme Court, which means because there are all of these fees, because most people will need some legal help, if you lose your case in Supreme Court, the court can order that you pay costs. That's not, there's a sort of a table of costs that you'll have to pay. And that can be, depending on how complicated your matter was, thousands of dollars in additional expenses over and above what you might be asked to pay in property division or spousal support. So the Supreme Court is very costly. Yeah.
Okay. 对，就是如果你第一份文件那个 Notice of Family Claim 是200，然后 Notice of Trial 也是200，就是那个文件你要约一个日子去详听的话也是200，然后其他的都是其实有很多的费用，所以我们就是说了我们大部分时间会用到的，其他是那个 Settlement Case Conference 跟如果你要 去法官那边，就是解决一些小小的问题，在详庭之前解决一点问题。那个 application 也是80，我们没有记错的话。还有，如果你已经有那个同意书，你不用去付那个200，你可以就是付30块，然后就可以递交那个同意书，那个是比较省钱的。如果你已经很多东西是同意，然后你已经有一个同意书，如果你是你需要的话，你可以在高等法院申请一份就是说 waiver， 就是你全部那个费用，你如果法官觉得OK， 我可以给你这个 waiver 的话，你所有的费用都不用付。但是呢，如果你想庭之后，法官会判，就是裁判，就是谁赢谁输，输的那方可能法官会很大机会就是要你付另一方的所有费用，所以是高级法院是比较负责。如果你真的要去高级法院解决你的问题的话，你真的需要去找一个律师，我们觉得比较是好一点。对 ，OK Charlene。
Next question is, where can people find mediators, and are there mediators that can speak Chinese? Yeah, so 在哪里可以找到 mediator 或是调解人的服务，然后是否有说普通话的调解人？
So I'll just share the link for Mediate BC. That's one place you can find mediators. They keep a roster, a list of active mediators. I think there are other mediators as well, and you can search for them in the same way you'd search for a lawyer. Many lawyers are also mediators, but some mediators are also therapists, which is kind of neat, I think, because it's a different skill set. Jenny might be able to answer whether or not there are mediators who speak Chinese. There are. ADRBC.com. Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. 你可以去 BDABC 跟那个 ADRBC 去找那个 mediator 调解人。他们那个search engine 你可以去找他说什么语言的。或者是他有什么，你可以他都会跟你说他是做家庭法的，或者是其他的法律问题的。有很多调解人是律师，但是也有很多做家庭法的调解人是做counselor， 就是心理治疗师或者是psychologist， 都是心理医生。所以你可以像那个 Media BC 跟ADRBC 去看一下，如果你需要做那个调解，你可以去问一下，他们有很多的资料，2个网址也有很多家庭法的资料可以给大家。
Okay, next question is, when a couple have gotten married in China and they gotten the permanent residency status after they came to Canada, and afterwards they got divorced in China, do they still have to get divorced in Canada? 就是请问夫妇在中国结婚拿到 PR 后移民到加拿大后，在中国办了离婚手续，还需要在加拿大办理什么离婚手续？
That's a great question. generally, Canada generally recognizes divorce, a divorce from another country. I think the two requirements that I've seen are that the divorce must be valid under the laws of that country. So, and two, this, I think at least one spouse, doesn't have to be both, must have lived in that country for a full year immediately before applying for the divorce. But there are, so that's the general rule. But, and here comes the lawyer answer, it depends. There are situations where a British Columbia family court may not recognize a foreign divorce. And I would, especially if both parties agree that they are divorced, I'm not so concerned, meaning that's not something that the parties are going to argue about. But if there's some disagreement about whether or not that foreign divorce was valid, and I can think of circumstances where that might happen, then there might be an issue. I would speak to a lawyer, and a lawyer, frankly, a lawyer with some experience in cross-border family law issues, meaning family law issues that involve multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries, because those can be pretty complicated. And another and, here we go, sorry, Jenny. And a divorce is just a divorce. So family court may say that's fine and good, but if you have property here in Canada, a foreign judgment may not resolve issues relating to that foreign property. As a general rule, the Canadian courts have jurisdiction over property and assets that are located in Canada, and they do not necessarily have jurisdiction, well, they don't have jurisdiction for the most part over assets that are located overseas. So that this is another concern for people who may have assets in both countries or contacts in both countries. I've seen cases where a wife or a husband empties the bank account and leaves the country. And it can be very challenging to use Canadian courts to get that money back if there isn't other property that could be used to balance that out. So there are a lot of moving parts. And so in a case where you've obtained a foreign divorce, it may be good to, even before you agree or before that divorce is granted, to get some legal help here to make sure that all of your interests are protected, both here and overseas.
Okay, I'll try my best to translate that. OK， 这个是非常好的问题，因为是一个很复杂的一个问题，是最简单的答案就是如果那个离婚手续是在另一个中国的法院是处理好的话，加拿大是应该会很大机会说是承认这个离婚。但是呢，如果你是有其他的财产分割啊，或者是你有在那个财产是在加拿大或者是中国，或者你有那个bank account 里面有钱的话，你有户口那些我们都可能那个法院，如果那个财产在中国，可能我们没有那个这里的法院不可以就是做有一个法律效力吧。所以他说，如果你真的有这些问题的话，他会建议你就是找一个 家庭法的律师，但是也要懂得就是跨国的那个律师，所以他会比较清楚那些跨国不同的法律怎么去处理，加拿大的法院会不会承认你的那个同意，或者是你在中国的离婚。River 还要说，如果你是你们两个双方都同意离婚的话，那个是没有问题的啦。但是如果有一方不同意，你就真的需要找一个律师去问一下你的个别的情况。Thank you, Charlene.
Okay, so the next one that I see, it's about so I guess this couple, they are applying for reunification. I'm not sure what that application exactly is, but when they're applying for, I guess, reunification to get one party to come to Canada, the female got pregnant during that time. Can the male party get a divorce and like cancel his status of being a guarantor or whatever his status is to get the other party to come here? 所以这个问题我就用中文念出来。请问在申请夫妻团聚期间，女方怀孕的男方担保方可以提出离婚吗？可以取消担保吗？谢谢。
So, first of all, I can't answer specific questions, so I just want to make that clear, especially with something like this. Good idea to talk to a lawyer, especially a lawyer with some background in immigration. There are some elements to this question that relate to immigration law, and there's some relationship often in these cases between family law and immigration law. But just briefly, there are rules and agreements that people make with the government of Canada when sponsoring somebody and when being sponsored. And those agreements and the obligations flowing from them exist apart from the family law system. The family law system can also recognize those agreements, meaning if someone sponsors somebody and they come to Canada, they're in Canada and they don't have the ability to work, and then they cancel the sponsorship agreement. I have seen cases, and I've actually argued cases, where they have to pay spousal support, even for a very short relationship, in recognition of the fact that they said they would financially support that person. There's also, of course, I've also seen cases where that person then goes on social assistance and the Canadian government goes to the sponsor and says, you need to pay for this social assistance because you signed a contract with the government of Canada that you would look after this person. So before doing anything like that, I would speak to an immigration lawyer or to the immigration lawyer assisting you in your sponsorship, and make sure that you are protected depending on what decision you choose to make. Can you get a divorce? Yes, you can get a divorce. Before you get a divorce, a judge will look to make sure that any children of the relationship or the marriage are looked after. That's also really important. So even if you were to cancel this agreement and get a divorce, you still may have some obligation to care for that child, and that may mean child support or something like that. So yeah, a lot of moving parts. Good idea to speak to a lawyer before you do anything important like that.
我们先跟大家说，这个是非常我们听到很多非常好的问题，但是我们在这里真的不可以就是给那个法律意见，但是 River 是很努力的帮我们尝试跟你说一些他所知道的东西。他建议你们去找一个移民 律师，因为加拿大如果他说如果那个移民的那一方面跟家庭法是可能两个东西，两个部分，但是家庭法跟那个移民法都会就是看那个合约，你同意当做那个那个女生过来，所以你一定要就是找律师找意见，然后你会那个离婚可以吗？他说那个很短的答案是可以的，但是呢，如果你是有小朋友，就是刚才蔡小姐说那个她是已经怀孕嘛，所以那个法院一定会去就是看那个小孩有没有得到那个赡养费的帮助，因为他们需要知道那个小朋友是可以有钱去生活，对。
Question just related to this other one, sent by the same person, and he said that they don't have children, but I guess their main concern is also about like division of property, and their question was like how long the litigation would be. 所以刚才这个问题，同一个人也问说，因为财产分割有议题，想请问这样官司要打多长时间？然后我想要再加一下，就是刚才 River 说那个法庭他们会看您要不要给孩子赡养费，这个是就是说，如果那个你们俩，如果是那个孩子是别人的孩子的话，可能又更复杂的一点，这样子。
Yes, it's hard to say how long something's going to take, and it depends a lot on how many issues you and your spouse can resolve together, either through mediation or dispute resolution or through a settlement conference. If there's a lot of stuff you agree on, and there's one or two things you really don't agree on, then it can be much quicker. If you disagree about everything, it usually means a long trial. It usually means you need to take a lot of steps to collect all the evidence you need to express your point of view, especially around property issues. And I mean, so this isn't even really an estimate, but I just booked a trial for somebody, and it was a 5-day trial, which is normal if there's property issues and other issues involved. And that trial booked over a year. It will be, so I booked it just last week, and they'll wait a year before their trial, and that's pretty normal right now.
就一个人家结婚了不久，那么我问这个问题，我说同居的话算不算事实婚姻？要不要分开的时候要不要分遗产？然后后来有的一个娘的，分那个分割财产，然后呢，后来那个跟在我后面一个人还说，那如果那样子的话，有房子的话要不要？就是听得哪回答？一个外国人对回答不出来，那个假使你是来在中国移民的过来的，那样带来中国，还是来中国结婚，在了加拿大也承认的，哦，就问题，侪是家离婚了不如。其实那法律个是吧多了啦，很多。
您好，因为可以请您先把您的麦克风关起来吗？因为我们可以听得到您的声音。
sorry，
没关系，谢谢。
怎么会？
哦，这样可以了，谢谢。Okay, sorry about that. Can't mute people, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe let Jenny translate, but just to say, it can be, you can wait over a year to get your trial if you can't agree on things. So that is why, if you can agree about something, things can go much faster, especially if you engage the help of a mediator, for example. You'll get to see a mediator a lot faster. And that's one reason why it can be a good idea to just, find a good mediator and spend the money to try and resolve some of these issues while you're waiting. Book the trial for a year down the road, and if you're lucky, you'll cancel it because you've resolved your legal issues. It's a long wait, and that's because there's a lot of people who want to use the family system, and there's actually not very many judges. There's a very small number in both provincial and Supreme Court. I do think things will go much faster in provincial court. And again, that's why if you can wait on property, and you may not be able to, maybe the issues are too urgent, not a bad idea to resolve parenting issues, spousal support, and child support issues in provincial court, and then deal with property in Supreme Court. But if you have urgent issues, you can't do that. You got to go right to Supreme Court.
是那个问题是要多久才可以处理到那个家庭的问题，家庭离婚的问题。就是第一个答案就是很难说，因为每个人的情况都不同。如果你可以有很多东西都可以同意的话，只有一两种是不同意，你可能那个会情绪会坏一点。但是如果你真的全部都不同意，那肯定就是很久了。还有，如果现在你要约那个 trial 是一年之后才可以有那个日子给你。所以你可以先去就是约那个 trial date， 但是你中间的时间你可以找一个调解师去帮助你看看是否可以大家双方坐下了解大家需要什么然后有什么可以同意的，然后你的情绪会比较快一点。还有如果你有很多复杂的问题财产分割的，你会有很多表格要填要递交，还有文件就是你可能有很多房屋的那个文件银行的文件你收入的文件很多都要给那个法院。对，那个高级法院的话是比较就是 refer 说是比较慢一点的，因为那个法庭是真的很忙。如果你要有一些是在省级法院可以处理的问题，他建议你们去那个省级法院，应该会比较快一点可以处理。
Okay, I think before I say another question, I think a lot of people just have questions about like legal advice. I'm wondering whether we could provide them with like a list of like lawyer referral or like services like that to our participants, just in case if at this stage they don't know which court forms to fill out, but they just want some legal advice first. Like wondering where they could go first.
Yeah, Access Pro Bono has a lawyer referral service, and I will, I'll just put that in the chat.
Thank you. 因为今天很多问题就是相关法律建议的问题，然后我们 AC 就是主要是帮忙怎么填写法律表格，所以今天大概没办法回答所有人的问题到一个完整的地方，所以呢River 就是给了我们这一个连结，如果你有任何问题需要咨询一个律师的话，这个连结他们的律师的服务前半个小时是免费的，所以如果你 make appointment 的话 就是得到30分钟免费的法律顾。然后之后如果您知道要填写哪些文件的话，您可以来找我们，我们是免费的，可以帮您填这样。OK， 所以how much time do we have for questions still?
How many questions do we have?
Just like 1, 2, like 4-ish.
Well, let's try to get through them.
There's one that applies less specific. So it's about whether or not when people who live together, whether or not they are spouses, and whether or not when they separate, do they need to divide their assets. 所以问题是，同居伴侣没有注册是事实婚姻关系吗？分开的时候要分割财产吗？
Oh, that is a great question. So the standard that is used is marriage-like relationship, meaning you're together with this person in a relationship that is similar to a marriage. Meaning, doesn't mean that you have to. There are a whole bunch of different factors that could be used by a court to determine that you're in a common law relationship. That can include a sexual relationship is a big one. Combining assets together, like having joint accounts, that's another big one. So it's more like there are very obvious cases, my partner and I have been together almost 10 years. We're not married, but I'm pretty sure I'd get in trouble with a court if I tried to claim we weren't in a common law relationship. That's very clear. There are situations that are less clear, and there's a lot of very interesting case law in the courts where one person thinks that they're in a common law relationship and the other person does not think they are at all. And so that line can be a bit foggy. If you're just a roommate, that's not enough. If you're, then, most of the people renting in Vancouver would be in trouble, in really serious trouble. So it has to be more than that. It has to be a romantic or a marriage-like relationship. And that doesn't always mean sex. It doesn't always mean a sexual relationship or children. But that is, I would say that's a pretty good line. If you're sleeping in the same bed at night, at that point, you should start to be concerned. Maybe just translate that, Jenny. I'll think if there's anything additional to say about it, because it's an interesting question.
这个是一个非常好的问题。Sorry， 蔡小姐，你现在你想就是给他们去预约那个我们的服务吗？
因为我们有很多的问题现在，所以我们想说比较好的运用我们时间方式，就是在这边我们会继续回答你们的问题。但是如果你们没有问题，想要直接跟我们预约的话，请你就现在在这个 message 地方私讯我，然后我就会把你送到我们这边的人员，然后看可以帮你现在就直接预约我们的服务。Yeah. So I was just talking about how we'll still be doing a Q&A here, but in the interest of time, people who don't have questions, we can send you to make an appointment with us right now. So just let me know in the chat if you want to make an appointment, and I can send you into the.
Okay. Thank you. 所以如果是那个伴侣没有结婚的话，法院是会看，那个法官会看你们是不是跟结婚的关系是差不多的。其实有很多的东西他们会去看。第一是有没有性关系啊，有没有共同的财产啊，你们一起 生活有那个婚姻，不是婚姻的生活，但是像婚姻的生活多久啊？如果是你们这三个东西都是有的话，那个法官差不多是100%会跟你说你们是需要就是像你们是婚姻结婚了一样的处理的，对。
Yeah, and so the short answer that I'd like people to take away is you have to have been in a marriage-like relationship for at least 2 years if you're dealing with property division, and it can be less if it around issues relating to spousal support or child support if you have a child together. So for property division, 2 years. And I would say, and that starts on the date that you start living together in a marriage-like relationship. But because that can be the subject of disagreement, meaning you may not agree with the other person about when you started living together that way, I would say if you have significant assets, property, or a significant income, and you're worried about that property, I would speak to a lawyer early while things are still good and possibly have an agreement put together to protect your interests in this relationship. So, you know, something to consider.
So is that like a prenup agreement?
Well, it would be a cohab because you may not get married, right? A prenup
right,
is
it's like yeah. Okay.
Yeah, don't want to get their hopes up. Say it's a prenup.
Okay. 所以简单的答案就是，如果你有财产的话，法官会看，如果你已经已经有2年的时间是一起的话，他就会说，你那个财产是应该分割的。但是如果你那个有小孩子要付的费用，或者是赡养费，那个你一起的时间可能是短一点，他们会看那个复杂的问题就是那个你们开始的时候是什么日子，因为它决定你那个时间一起的时间长短，就是你开始一起生活像婚姻生活的那个开始这个可能有时候大家不同意这个什么时候开始的，所以River 说，如果你有很多财产的话，你应该去找一个律师是做一个好像是 prenup， 但是不是那个叫做是 cohabitation 那种同意书，就是可以帮你保护你的财产这样子。
Okay. Sorry, just a public announcement. Is anyone here ACVAC4 VAC? Because I'm no longer a host. And you are the host. I'm not sure what happened, but if you're ACVAC4 VAC, please make me a host. Thank you. Okay, next question. Do we provide cohabitation agreement services? Simple question. Thanks.
I don't think AC does, and Jenny and or Dom might be able to correct me on this. I don't think we do, and the reason for that is if you get an agreement, I really suggest getting the help of a lawyer to finalize an agreement. Even if you go to a mediator and the elements of the agreement are clear, these agreements are kind of like a will, and maybe it's the same reason why AC doesn't do wills, is these are documents that are almost like time capsules. They have to survive sometimes for a very long time. And so they have to be very carefully written, and they have to be very specific to the circumstances of the parties. And so a cohabitation agreement should reflect the concerns that you may have relating to your property. Could involve, I mean, one big one is inheritance. That's really good reason to get a cohab. So you are going to receive a large amount of money from your parents, maybe when they pass, or often parents will give that money while they're still alive so they can get, they can see what's going to happen with it. See you move into that beautiful house in Vancouver, because you need your parents' help to get the houses these days in Vancouver. They're so expensive. But your parents may say, look, we're happy to help you with the down payment, but what if something happens with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and that we don't want them to take half of our down payment with them when they leave. And so that would be a good reason to put together a cohab, but then that cohab should reflect the specific concerns relating to your case. And let's hope when we're doing a cohab, we're hoping that document is going to sit in a bookshelf for 30, 40, 50 years, right? We hope that we're not going to have to look at it next year. If you're worried about that, maybe it's time to get on Tinder and get away from this person that you're with. And so it's a very complicated document, and it's kind of not, this is getting too close to legal advice, but it's almost not worth doing if it's not worth paying for. If you have significant assets, it's worth getting insurance. It's worth paying a lawyer a couple $1,000s. It's depending on, it's one document. So often lawyers will tell you they'll quote you an amount and say it'll cost this much for me to do this, because it's not litigation or trial. I think it's worth spending that money if you have significant assets. It's just like insurance. We spend $50 a month or $100 a month making sure that our art or our furniture, if it is destroyed in a flood or a fire or something, is protected. In the same way, it might be a good idea to spend a little bit of money with a lawyer to make sure that your assets and your legacy are protected. And AC is not really equipped to do that.
我们 AC 法庭之友是不可以帮助你们做那个 cohabitation agreement， 因为其实我们第一是我们不会提供法律意见，每个星期我们的时间就是1个小时、2个小时的 appointment， 所以其实那个 cohabitation 的 agreement， 如果你要做这个同意书的话，你应该是有你的财产，那个需要保护的财产，所以我们建议你就是找一个家庭法的律师去做一份cohab 同意书，然后如果你想知道那个费用是多少，你找他的时候，你可以说我有什么财产，大概有什么，我跟我的伴侣住了多久，然后他会根据你的复杂你的情况去跟你说我会多少钱可以帮你做完这个同意书。对，蔡小姐，我们还有很多问题吗？我就不
其实
我就
不好意思，因为现在已经差不多9点钟，我觉得我们应该已经要完，不好意思。不过其实很感谢你们今天过来，就是帮我们一起去主持这个活动。我知道其实是挺难的一个话题，不过真的很感谢你们今天来帮忙，因为其实你们可能不知道 AC 其实是一个义工的团体，他们呢现在都只是他们都是在法律方面的一些行政的人员或者是律师，不过他们今天晚上其实都是当义工来帮我们做这个讲座，因为他们知道在这个社区里面其实有好多人就是没办法可以就是拿到这些服务，所以呢他们今天才会这样愿意去帮我们。那如果还有什么问题的话，不用担心，就好像刚刚 River 打出来的那个网站一样。Access Pro Bono 是有半个小时免费的律师服务，可以就是让你有那个免费的咨询，或者如果你们真的最后觉得我需要帮忙填写一些法庭里面的表格，因为那些表格太复杂了，我不懂得怎么去填，你可以再跟AC 去联系，这个是他们的网站，还有他们电话号码。那我们很感谢，就是 Thank you River so much and Jenny for your help today. It's wonderful to have you to volunteer. I know it's a lot of time that you spent right here, but thank you so much. And also thank you, Charlene. 也谢谢蔡小姐，就是帮我们今天回答所有问题。那麻烦你就是如果可以的话，我会在电邮里面再放上他们的联系，还有今天他们打出来的在那个 chat box 里面的那些联系，我都会打出来。那也麻烦你们如果可以的话，填写一下今天的那个回应表格或者如果还有什么其他问题，你可以尝试找我。不过我不是律师，我不懂得回答你们的问题，我可以帮你的，只是告诉你在哪里可以找到这些答案。好啦，谢谢大家 ，Thank you so much，
谢谢 Elsie， 谢谢给我们这个机会在这里跟大家做这个。
Excuse me, can I ask one last question? Because I just left the question a long time ago, but
sorry about that. Okay. 可以吗 ？That depends on like Jenny and River. 可以吗？如果只是在最后一个问题了，如果这样是 OK 吗
？River?
If you're okay, Jenny.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Just one last question then. Okay. 最后真的是最后一个问题了，好吗？不好意思啊。
Okay, last question. Yes.
Thank you very much. And the question is, my child and I are PR or Canadian citizen, but my husband is a Chinese, and we plan to get divorced. But the thing is, my husband is very rich and powerful in China, and he plans to keep my child in China and does not want her to come back to Canada. And another thing is because he's very powerful, so he has enough power to hide his access in China. But I know that the information between those two countries can be transparent. So in this case, could you give me some suggestions how to protect my child and how to, get some fair treatment for my child? Because my child is very small, only 12 years old right now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, Mabel, that sounds very serious, and I can't give you specific legal advice about your situation here. But I would encourage you to speak to a family lawyer about this. But I can give you some general information to help you think about this issue, because it's not an uncommon concern in family law, especially with families or people that have relationships overseas in other countries, not just China, but I've had clients who have issues in South America, India, Japan. And so the first thing is that if your child is here with you, that's good. And you can keep it that way by seeking an order that your child not be removed from the Lower Mainland or from Vancouver without court order or without your written consent. So you can seek what's called a non-removal order. And that is especially important in cases with countries like China. There is a piece of international law called the Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child abduction, but usually we just call it the Hague Convention. And this is a special law that allows that where all the countries that have agreed to it agree that if a child is abducted by one parent into that jurisdiction, into that country will cooperate with any legal process that occurs in the home country. And China is not a signatory. And that's, partly because I don't think they would want to necessarily cooperate with a Canadian court process. Diplomatically, that probably wouldn't be a good idea for them. But that also means that certainly if one parent takes a child to China, it can be very difficult or costly or impossible to recover them. And this is a problem that happens, not just in China, but other countries that are not Hague signatories, and even some countries that are Hague signatories, but their legal systems are not as fair as Canada's legal systems. So it can cost thousands and thousands of dollars that a parent just doesn't have to navigate that system. And so if there is a fear that one parent is going to remove a child and not return them, it is a good idea to get a non-removal order. And there are other steps that you can take to possibly prevent, to bring up a red flag when a parent is maybe trying to take a child through security at an airport, for example. There are also steps you can take to prevent a parent from obtaining a passport without your consent. So there are a lot of steps you can take to prevent the removal of a child. AC can help with some of those applications, like an application to the provincial court, for example, for a non-removal order. But in a case like this, where the stakes are so high, I would really encourage you to speak to a lawyer, and possibly even, a lawyer with a background in Hague issues, because there are lawyers in BC, for example, that are specialists in dealing with Hague problems, partly because it is a very serious problem and it's very frightening when a child is removed, and it does happen.
Thank you, River. Mabel, 你刚才问的问题是用英语的，所以你需要我翻译吗？还是有什么特别的问题？
你帮我翻译一下，谢谢。
好，他不可以给你那个你对你的法律意见，但是他就是觉得如果你那个小孩子现在是在加拿大跟你一起的话，你可以去法院去做那个叫一个 order non-removal order， 那你的孩子就可以，你可以保护你孩子在你身边。还有另一个他说到是那个叫Hague Convention， 就是如果一方的母亲或者是父亲带走了孩子，另外一个国家可以那个法律那个法律程序可以在那个另外一个国家去进行，但是呢中国是没有签署那个 Hague Convention 的，所以他真的是River 就是真的建议你，因为是你的孩子，你一定要去找一个律师要有那个懂得 Hague Convention 那个knowledge 的那种律师。还有什么问题吗
？How do you spell Hague Convention? How do you spell this word?
Oh, okay, River, can you just type it in? Thank you. 对，不好意思，因为今天已经过了9点了，大家都很要吃饭要睡觉
完全了解。好，谢谢 Jenny
对每个人。 谢谢你们，希望你们的法律问题都可以解决
好的
有什么问题随时可以找我们的。对，
好的，然后 Mabel 刚刚那个 hate convention 已经填River 写在那个 box 里面 chat box 里面，希望你可以看到。那今天真的不好意思，其他的问题我们不可以再接收了，因为现在已经9:09。那我相信他们其实今天已经很忙，然后还要晚上当义工来帮忙解释这些问题，帮我们解答这些问题，我们很感恩，谢谢大家。Thank you so much, River and Jenny again. So thankful to have you all right here today. Thank you and 如果其他的麻烦你们可以的，就我们会